everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to our webinar on the process of going independent. This webinar is intended for captive insurance agents who are or who have been considering becoming independent agents. The format of this webinar is a live pre-recorded event. What that means is that it's recorded live, so we're all here right now talking, and we're going to replay the audio and the video, but we'll also be there live to respond to any questions that you may have. So feel free to just chat us in the chat box whenever you have a question about what we're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be discussing here today and kind of do an overview of the agenda of our time together. Before I outline the content, let me remind you that at the end of the webinar, we're going to be giving out some resources as kind of a reward for staying with us. These are some incredible resources here. As you can see on the slide, it's just great content, and I hope that you really find it extremely useful, especially at this stage of the process. Great. So first, we're going to take a look at why. Why would you want to become an independent insurance agent? If you've already got a captive insurance agency and it's successful, what's the allure? What are the reasons why you might want to look at becoming an independent agent? Then we're going to look at some of the considerations of, okay, so if I want to go down that route, what are the things that I kind of need to be thinking about? We'll talk about some legal considerations, financial and practical considerations of becoming an independent insurance agent. Then we'll talk a little bit about what to expect when you're becoming an insurance agent, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So with that, I'd like to introduce our presenters, our guests, and our experts, Jeremy and Jenny. So Jeremy's our Chief Executive Officer here at Connect Insurance, and he has plenty of experience. So we're going to put the spotlight on him here and let him introduce himself, tell us a little bit about both what drives him personally and his professional experience.
Hello, this is Jeremy Poole, CEO of Connect Insurance. I started my insurance career in 1998. I was a captive agent, then I went independent. And then in 2008, we started the aggregator that is now CIA. And I have now grown to 100 agents, and we're in 10 states, and we're looking to continuously grow with the right agents, of course.
Awesome. So Jenny's our Vice President of Recruiting here at Connect Insurance, and I'm sure many of you have already started speaking with her about the possibility of joining the family. For those of you that may not have had the opportunity already to have a one-on-one with her, she's also the voice of many of the articles of our blog, The Producer. Jenny's obviously very experienced as well, and I got to say she absolutely loves what she does. I think she was kind of born to advise agents, and we're lucky to have her. So Jenny, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, this is Jenny Hoffman-McGraw, and I've been in the insurance industry for, about 20 years now. Started in insurance while I was working in college on the agency side, transitioned over to a franchise model, and then went to work on the carrier side. And I guess when I left the carrier side, working in predominantly marketing, I had the opportunity to come to Connect, and I felt like it was a good move for me because having worked on both sides of the field, agency and carrier side, I wanted to work with a cluster or an aggregator model that would be easy to sell. And so that was one of the reasons why I chose Connect, because I thought, seeing all of the different models out there, I thought Connect had the best contract and would be the route that I would take should I ever want to go independent agent myself.
Great. All right. So with that, I guess it's my turn. I'm a resident geek. My name is Andres Marquez, and I actually started at Allstate Agency too, being a producer for a family friend, and then from there worked at a call center, and now I'm over here in Dallas. And so personally, I'm a spreadsheet enthusiast. That is a thing. And I'm also a proud veteran. I served 5 years in the Marine Corps. I love computers, motorcycles, my wife, 2 kids, and I love marketing. I absolutely love it. I love figuring out how to tell the story of your business and in a way that helps you connect with your prospective and existing clients so they care about your story and know that you care about them. I love the challenge and the thrill of it. And so now it's your turn. I'm going to turn it over to you, and why don't you go ahead and just, in the chat box that's right there, go ahead and tell us your name and maybe a little bit about yourself in the chat window. Feel free to respond to each other as well. We'll also do our first poll here. We're going to assume that most of you are currently captive agents, so we'd like to know how long have you been a captive agent. We have now, keep in mind that this isn't indicative of everybody that we talk to or even the market. We do these webinars every so often, and the results are different every single time. So don't feel intimidated if somebody has a lot, or if the majority of people have a lot more or a lot less experience than you do. All right. So let's hit the ground running here. It looks like we have a great turnout. I'm sure we'll have even more join us throughout the webinar. If you see someone hop on, feel free to welcome them. Reach out and say hi in the chat window. Don't forget to let them know that we have these great bonuses for you at the end of the webinar. All right, so let's jump right in. So I read one agent's account of his transition from being a captive agent to becoming an independent agent once. And he was saying how his decision was as simple as seeing when the pros of being a captive agent outweigh the cons it's as simple as just saying, okay, it's time to go independent. I think it's a very interesting way to look at it. So that's how we're going to start. We're going to weigh the pros and the cons. So Jeremy, Jenny, what would you say are some of the pros of being a captive agent?
Well, I would say one thing that comes to mind would be training. Most of the captive companies do provide really in-depth training. A lot of it is on their products only, so you're just getting a Allstate or a Farmers product overview, but they do a really good job of training someone who's relatively new to insurance and inexperienced with insurance products.
I would agree, and I'd also say marketing, of course. Name recognition helps quite a bit. Anytime you hear of an Allstate or State Farm, you automatically get a little bit of credibility with that. And so I think that's definitely a pro for being on the captive side.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to jump on those big marketing budgets that they have. What are some of the cons?
The first thing I think of is you have one product. So, for example, for your home or auto, you have just the one product. You don't have any options. The only way to save your customer $1 is to reduce their coverage or change their deductibles to a higher deductible. And that really puts you at a disadvantage because you only have just that one product. You don't have any other options. It's very restrictive.
Yeah, and to add on that, I would say that the going with the one product, everything in insurance is cyclical. Carrier can be very competitive today. Next week, they're not. And they may be not competitive for a year. And so your problems with it being uncompetitive is that you build up a book of business for a year or two, and you've got a nice book of business, and then all of a sudden for a year or two you're no longer competitive and your business starts to trend downwards. And so I liken an agency to what I call a mom and pop shop in that environment. It's kind of like a small independent agency in the same environment. The problem you have with having one market or limited markets is that you can build up but then you lose because you're no longer competitive.
Absolutely. You're kind of at the mercy of the carriers. I remember speaking to a couple agents, I'm not going to name any names as far as the carrier, but where the carrier was trying to push out the smaller agents and have the bigger kind of agencies absorb them. And there's not much you can really do at that point. So I can see how that can be extremely frustrating. What about ownership of the agencies, captive versus independent?
Yeah, on the captive side, you have an economic interest, and on the independent side, you actually own the book of business, which is always nice, of course.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a huge, huge difference there. So what are some of the pros of being an independent agent?
Well, there are a lot of pros, but one thing that I think is probably at the top of the list would be options. As an independent agent, you have access to a myriad of commercial markets, personal markets, life and health products, and it's not just one product. You're not exclusive to one company. You have a myriad of companies, and you can do the quoting and give the best rate and the best coverage for that customer and really tailor the policy for that customer using all of your different markets.
Yeah, and going back to what I was saying earlier about the cyclical in nature, it's the same thing on the independent side. When the cycle is down on the independent side, you have additional options, and so you continuously grow as an agent. So you're not limited to your growth during a certain time period, which is obviously the number one reason. You don't want to go and waste your time working your tail off for 6 months to a year, advertising like crazy with an uncompetitive product. You want to know that you're always in the market, and you can do that with the independent channel, and that's phenomenal. Plus, you have no marketing restrictions, which is also a very important piece, because on the captive environment, they limit every bit of your marketing, and it becomes problematic as an agent. On top of that, you've got criteria, and I think another big one for me personally was that as a captive agent, you don't work for the insured, you work for the carrier. On the independent side, you work for the insured. So you truly have their best interest at heart and not the carrier's best interest at heart. Yeah. You are their liaison, you're their person to go to when there's any kind of problems. You are everything for them, whereas on the captive environment, you're very limited to what you can do for an individual.
Yeah, in the captive environment, you're just following their agenda.
Yeah, so I can definitely see how the pros of having the marketing and the support and stuff can start to not seem that important when you have all those kind of cons and you have a lot more pros on the independent side of things. So is it always better to be an independent agent?
It depends on the situation. Brand new agents with no experience may make sense for them to go the captive route because there is a little bit more in-depth training and they hold your hand a little bit more. But my personal opinion is always go independent.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be either or. You can have professional support, with Connect without having to have all of those restrictions.
Now let's do another poll of the audience here. So what motivates you to want to become an independent insurance agent? So we have a few options here on the poll, but if you have your own reasons that we haven't thought of, then feel free to write it in the chat box and communicate with each other about that. All right, let's move on to the different considerations that you have when you're thinking of becoming an independent insurance agent, the kinds of things that you're going to want to keep in mind and kind of investigate some more. So let's start with legal considerations. Jerry, what are some of the legal considerations you want to keep in mind while you're looking at becoming an independent insurance agent?
Well, number one, are you legally able to become an independent insurance agent?
Well, what do you mean by that?
Your in-force contract and what restrictions are in those contracts.
Okay, so where do you start with that?
The existing contract with the parent company.
Yeah, and I would suggest obviously having that reviewed by a lawyer.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to get anything wrong there, I'm guessing. What are you looking for? What is the lawyer looking for in that?
Well, first and foremost is obviously whether or not your contract allows for you to leave the particular carrier you're with and what kind of restrictions you have in that regard. How long it takes to get in and out of the contract, what kind of notice do you have to provide to the carrier to get out of that contract, and what are your requirements for that, and then what do you get in return for that, because a lot of times there is some kind of buyout in some nature. And then you can look at also what your non-compete is, because sometimes your non-compete is for a long period of time, sometimes it's for a short period of time, but those are things you have to put in consideration because you may or may not need that book of business later on when you go the independent route.
So, Jenny, if you have a really restrictive kind of contract that says in black and white that you just can't do it, are you kind of out of options, or are you just kind of that's it then, or?
Not necessarily.
No, it depends.
Sometimes there are exceptions or loopholes.
So you never really know, I guess, unless the lawyer takes a look at it. What if you just want to terminate and not be a captive agent with your carrier anymore?
Well, you'd have to look at the contract to see what your circumstances are and how or if you can terminate.
So who are the parties in the contract, and are you obligated professionally or as a business entity? Sometimes you can look at the contract and see who's contractually currently obligated. When it comes to opening up an independent agency, there are other options. Your spouse, significant other, friends and family, or a different business entity are always options. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, your options may actually surprise you.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Who's actually in the contract? Is it you or is it the...
Yeah, and I would say to add to that and even to add to the contracts, obviously we're not attorneys. And I would say that the best route for anybody to do is to actually look at their contract, but then also have someone who's a professional look at it and give them an idea of what their options truly are.
Yeah, so at the end, you do definitely want a lawyer to look over those contracts, right?
Absolutely. You don't want this to be a guessing game because you don't want something to haunt you later on in life.
I took a business law course once, and I think they kind of highlighted that it's important to look at where contracts are. What do you think about that?
Yeah, very, very important. You got to be aware of what law is applicable and where the disputes are arbitrated or litigated.
Yeah, and unfortunately, some states are more favorable to the company itself, the parent company, and other states are obviously more favorable to the agent themselves.
What do you mean by favorable?
What's enforceable? Forfeitures of earned commissions, for example.
Non-competes, they're handled differently depending upon what state you're in.
So you might have to forfeit your commissions.
Yeah, it really just comes down to who actually owns the book of business.
That's one of the biggest benefits of becoming an independent agent. Ownership is yours.
Sometimes you get a TPP.
What is a TPP?
Yeah, TPP is a buyout, and it gives you basically over the next 18 months to 2 years, depending on the contract that they sign, they will buy you out over that period of time. So it gives you the revenues that you need to continue your business, because as you're getting the TPP, you can build up your other book. And then once your restrictions of non-compete are up, then you can also go after your existing business.
I can see that. So is becoming an independent insurance agent, is that a hassle? Is it worth it?
Yeah, again, pros versus cons, make your list. It may be a process that takes a little while, but the benefits can be very, very substantial.
Awesome. Okay, so let's open it up to another poll for everybody. How familiar are you with your existing contract and terms and restrictions? And so we'll open this up. You have those options that you see in front of you, and if you, again, want to comment in the comment section, go ahead and do that. Now, there's also some financial considerations. Jeremy, what are some things that you're going to want to look at when you're thinking about the bank account?
Well, this goes kind of back to what I was discussing earlier. You have your TPP or buyout with some of these carriers, and you have to look at that and how that's going to support you going forward. You also have to look at whether or not your spouse or some significant other or someone else brings in revenue and how that's going to help provide for your family. And I will always say this, for the first year, that's the toughest for any business in general. And you have 12 months that you are going to make it or break it in the insurance world. And I usually tell that to every agent because you don't have the renewals coming in. It's all based on new business. And so you are basically living on your new business from a month-to-month situation. So I always like to have 6 months or at least 4 months of revenues already held back so that you're able to support yourself as you go forward.
Yeah, because you have to have some type of contingency plan. When you're starting out, you're probably not going to make money that first month. You might, but it won't be probably what you're used to. So you have to have contingencies in place and need to look at where and what you can do within a 6 to 12 month period. So if you don't have enough ongoing commissions, do you have support of your spouse via their paycheck, or just figuring that out? Yeah, you just need to make sure you can cash flow. And starting a business can be expensive. It doesn't always have to be expensive if you have the right partners.
So if you're not making any cash flow and you've got, you got to get your agency management system, you've got to get your E&O insurance, you've probably got some fees to pay. I mean, how do you do that? How do you take on the new expenditures without any income?
Well, that's kind of where I go back with the idea that you want to have a lot of new business coming in because that's absolutely important. However, you're right. There is some huge expenditures, especially if you're doing it on your own. That's where we're here to help, obviously. You don't have the high expense for having a management system in place from day one. We help you with cheaper raters. We help you through the process, and we even help with training so that if you bring in CSRs, there's help there as well, too.
Most of the big expenses when starting an independent agency, if you go with Connect, we can really reduce those expenses for you. And if you go out on your own, it is extremely expensive because you don't have discounts to things that you need, tools that you need to make your business successful and just open the business. And if you have the right partnership and we can help, give you some discounts on some of those expenditures you have to have.
Okay, awesome. So very, very informative there. So what are some of the practical logistical considerations that you should have when you're looking at becoming an independent agent?
What does your time frame look like? How long is it going to be before you can, 1, get out of your contract, 2, get started? You also want to obviously look at where you're at and then what your non-compete says with your particular carrier. Your carrier may not allow you to have any agency within a 30-mile radius or a 10-mile radius or 5-mile radius. So those are obviously things that you need to put into consideration.
And it's never too early to start, even if you're 6 months, a year, and you're thinking about it. It's a good idea to reach out and to make those calls and start formulating a plan well ahead of time before you intend to pull the trigger.
Absolutely. And then you obviously have to start putting into consideration getting appointments. That is going to be the biggest one of all. Either if you do it with Connect or you do it on your own, there is some time involvement there.
Yeah, that is probably one of the biggest challenges.
Absolutely. Luckily, we have a great webinar on getting carrier appointments, in fact. So if you want to register, you can go ahead and click on the link and it'll open up a new tab where you can register for that webinar. What other practical considerations would you say that people should be thinking about?
Marketing, marketing, marketing. Marketing is absolutely the most important thing that you do in your business, period. If you're not out drawing up new business, you're dying as an agent, whether you're exclusive or independent. And so that needs to be your number one focus. And you also need to have a website out there. It's absolutely important in today's environment that you have something out there that proves that who you are and gives you credibility with your peers. Because at the end of the day, you're out saying that you're a professional, but yet you don't have a website. That doesn't make any sense.
And referrals are great. I hear that a lot. Oh, I know a lot of people, I have a lot of referrals, but you can't proactively sit and wait for the phone to ring. You have to make it ring. And that goes back to having a plan and having a lead source and being able to market. And Andres, you have some great resources, webinars for that.
I do, actually. So I've been in marketing for some time now, and I've got a broad range of experience. But specifically, I've done a lot with lean budgets. And so I've got some webinars and courses that we've developed around that. And so if you want to register for one of the webinars, it's right here. Here's the link for it. And it's the Introduction to Successful Digital Marketing for Brick and Mortar Agents webinar. And so we'll be doing that pretty soon, too. Great. So going back to what Jeremy had said earlier about timeframes, let's do a quick poll for everybody. what is your time frame look like? How far out are you from making the actual transition from captive to independent? And now let's take a look at what to expect as an independent insurance agent. Before we go into too many details here, let's go ahead and, as promised, we're going to give you access to the bonus resources. That will come up here for a little bit, and you can click and put it and type in your email, and we'll send you those great resources. We also have another bonus, and this one's a little more limited. For those of you that are ready to explore the next steps, or even if you just have some general questions, we're going to give you an opportunity to have a one-on-one with Jenny here and get those questions answered. I'm going to put up a link to set an appointment with her, and what's even cooler is that for those of you that stayed with us this time and are making the appointment right now, we're going to also send you a complete Going Independent checklist and resource guide. It's a tool set, a roadmap to making this transition. It's great, and we're only going to give it to you all. It's not available on our website or anything, so just click on Make an Appointment, and we'll send you that resource.
Yes, and between that and having a conversation with Jenny, you'll be truly set up for success.
Great. Awesome. Now we can take a look at what to expect specifically if you were considering becoming an independent insurance agent with Connect Insurance. So one of the first questions I'd have for you is how much experience should an agent have?
Typically we like to deal with agents that are well-versed on insurance products. Typically someone that needs training on insurance products themselves is not going to be a good fit with Connect. So you just got your license, or you're newly licensed and have never worked in an insurance environment. It's typically not the agent that we're looking for. What we do best is help agents that are well-versed in insurance products and maybe just need a little help with their business model and setting up the new independent agency.
Awesome. So if I'm an existing agent, do I have to have a minimum number of years in the business, or?
We prefer that you have at least 3 years experience, but if you have an existing agency, there's no particular size that your agency book needs to be.
Oh, great. So I have to have a certain size of book of business or an established agency. So it doesn't matter how big my agency is?
It doesn't. We take agents that have a large book of business, and we take agents that have no book of business.
Awesome. So looking at becoming an independent insurance agent, one of the benefits is definitely being able to write with different carriers. What carriers am I able to write with Connect Insurance?
We have a plethora of carriers, and it really depends on the state. It depends on the agent's niche. So if you're more of a non-standard auto agency, we give you access to a lot of independent insurance carriers that will typically focus on that. If you're a well-rounded agent and you want to write it all, then we will look at giving you access to a set of carriers that will help you specifically in your business niche.
Then how does somebody go about getting those appointments with those carriers?
Well, you would work with Connect, and what we would do again is assess where you're at, what products you need to start your business, and what your niche is going to be. And then we give you a list of our carriers that we have access to, and typically some of our carriers will allow you direct access to their market. Other carriers will want to individually interview you and get to know you and know where your office is, and then talk to you about what your needs are as an agent and how many policies you think that you would need to write on a yearly basis with them.
Awesome. And those minimums would probably be better with us than it would be on their own, right?
Absolutely. A standalone agent is going to have a harder time getting an appointment than dealing with Connect, because we have a lot of established relationships in all of our states, and so it's just a simpler process. It goes a lot more smoothly.
Okay. And so what kind of commissions can an agent expect with us?
That's going to depend. Again, depends on your niche. If you're writing a commercial policies, some of those policies will bring in more commission, 15 to 20%. Again, it's going to depend on the state. So some states' commissions are 15-50 new and renewal for your standard markets. Some of the other states are a little bit less than that. Some states are a little bit more. It really depends on what your niche is. If you're writing standard or ultra preferred homeowners and auto business, it might be 1% amount. If you're writing a non-standard, then you're going to probably rely more on a fee-based system and a lesser commission, etc.
Awesome. Are there a lot of hoops that you have to jump through?
Typically, it's going to depend on the carrier. I always tell agents that depending upon how long it takes to get you appointed, it really is we're at the carrier's mercy. Some carriers we get set up, we get you a login and a password, and you're ready to go within a day or two. Other carriers, like I said before, are going to want to meet with you, have you fill out some paperwork. But usually it's a we have it down to a streamlined process. So we, again, at Connect will make it a lot easier than if you were trying to go at it alone.
Speaking of Connect, is there a lot of red tape to becoming a Connect Insurance independent agent?
No, actually, it's a really easy process. I would love to talk with people more about that, and it's very easy. Once you decide you want to go with us, I usually say we can have you running your agency within 30 days.
That sounds awesome. All right, folks, thanks for being with us here today. We are here for you, and our goal is to ensure your success and help you make the right decisions that are the best for you. If you haven't scheduled your one-on-one with Jenny, don't miss the opportunity. You have about 5 more minutes to do so before we shut it down. We're going to open it up for Q&A now, so feel free to ask your questions in the chat window, and we'll be here to respond. Thank you all for being here. Goodbye.